Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm excited to announce my new product, My Slippers. They took me over 2 years to develop because I didn't want just an ordinary slipper. My slippers are meant to be worn all day long, no matter what you're doing, whether you're inside or outside. My slippers come with an exclusive 3-tier cushioning system that you won't find in any other slipper. It combines 2 layers of foam, including my proprietary My Pillow foam and a patented impact gel made from U.S. soybeans. My 3-tier cushioning system is going to help relieve pressure points, provide that micro support you need for all-day comfort, and help prevent fatigue. Not only that, my slippers are made with high-quality leather and a premium indoor-outdoor sole that make them extremely durable. I personally guarantee they're going to be the most comfortable slippers you'll ever own. Go to MyPillow.com and click on the Radio Listeners Special Square and use promo code KeepTheFaith or call 800-422-5310. You'll also get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the Giza Dream bed sheets, the MyPillow mattress topper, and the MyPillow towels. Go to MyPillow.com and don't forget the promo code KeepTheFaith.
Worrying is not going to solve your problems. And I feel like I spent a lot of my early adulthood, in my 20s especially, worrying a lot about my future and my career. And then I met my husband on an airplane, and I worried about moving to England, and I worried. And I look back on that now, and the one thing I ask all of the young women that I mentor is to please don't worry your young lives away.
Former White House Press Secretary Dana Perino is with me today, and she's my special guest on CIA, Contagious Influencers of America, the podcast from the producers of Keep the Faith. I'm David Sams. Yeah, Dana was the White House Press Secretary serving under President George W. Bush. She's going to talk a little bit about that, and she's going to share some stories of her career and talk to us about some really fun things, like, of course, her dog, Jasper. And I know a lot of you who follow Dana, you're always asking about Jasper. He's a network or an internet influencer, I guess, himself. I mean, it's pretty interesting that this dog is loved by millions of people, especially those who watch Dana on the Fox News channel. Of course, she has her gig there, and she's an anchor and political commentator, and she's on every day on Fox News. So she's going to talk a little bit about that. And gosh, let me see. What else is she going to talk about? Well, you know, she has a new book out. She's going to talk about how everything will be okay and give us some life lessons for young women from a former young woman. And by the way, those aren't my words. That's her title and subtitle. So she's quite just an amazing person. She was a lot of fun to talk to on the phone and or on Skype, and I really appreciate the time that she gave us. Hey, I want to mention to you before we get to the interview that we have a big event coming up on the 29th of July through the 31st, 2021, and that is a Life Fest Music City. It's a party with a purpose. It's an outdoor festival. There'll be thousands of people there. Oh, gosh, there's camping, there's speakers. There are amazing artists that are going to be on the stages. There are going to be, I think, 4 stages, including a big headliner stage. And you'll see, like, Mandisa and Skillet and Colton Dixon and Danny Goki and Matthew West and Newsboys, Ledger. Who else am I? Who am I missing here? Lecrae. You know what? Just go to our website at KeepTheFaith.com and click on the Life Fest button, and you will see who's going to be there. Then again, you know, we've never had a festival like this in Nashville. I mean, it's crazy. We always have these big country music festivals, but never a Christian music festival. So this is going to be quite exciting. You know, it's on Johnny Cash's old farm down south below Nashville. So that's going to be fun. So make sure you get your tickets and make sure you put in promo code FAITH for a special discount, okay? That's Life Fest Music City coming to the Nashville area at the end of July. So please plan to attend I don't care where you're listening to this from, whether it's LA, Seattle, New York, you have a perfect reason to come to Nashville. And there are many reasons to come to Nashville. It's just a cool, cool city. So if you've ever wanted to come here, now you have a special reason to come here for Life Fest Music City at the end of July. Hey, let's get right to my interview that I just did recently with the one and only Dana Perino. How are you doing? It's David Sams.
I have to say for a Monday, I'm great. How are you?
Oh my gosh. Here we are on a Monday and we finally got through another great weekend. I have to ask you just to get this out of the way because, I got to ask the tough question number one, because yesterday I told our listeners that I was going to be interviewing you today. So come at me with your questions. And 2/3 of the questions were all about Jasper.
I know. I'm telling you, he is the most popular member of our family by far. People stop us like, is that Jasper? And they want a picture of him, not even of me. But I'm not jealous.
So tell me about Jasper for the few people who have no idea what we're talking about.
So Jasper is a Hungarian Vizsla, and that's it's the cousin to the Weimaraner. And for people that are familiar with the William Wegman dogs, they became very famous. And I got to know the Vizslas when I lived in England with my husband. We got a puppy from Scotland, and we named him Henry. And he was with me from when I was 26 to when I had almost turned 40. And so much of your life changes in that time span. To where I was not even working when I first got Henry, to when I was White House press secretary and then moved to New York to do the 5 for Fox News. So I just think about how, a dog can watch your whole life change. And the love that you have for your dog is hard to describe for people, but people that are pet owners, they certainly understand it. Mm-hmm. And then when Henry passed away, we had lived in New York for about 6 months. We were devastated. And I had never lived in an apartment in a skyrise in the city. And I thought, well, we can't possibly get another dog now, because how do you raise a dog in an apartment? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I got a phone call about 10 p.m. that night on a Sunday night, and it was Greta Van Susteren. And she said, Dana, I know you don't want to hear this from me, but I'm telling you the only way to heal your broken heart is to get another dog as quickly as possible. And Jasper came into our lives about 6 weeks later. He is almost 9 years old. He's grown up coming on Fox News. He's affectionate, athletic, silly, and so he, he's between he and my husband. Those are my two best assets for sure.
So if you had to pick between the two.
Well, we had good news. The Lord has blessed us with some good news today. Jasper fell ill a few weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it was very troubling. They can't tell you what's wrong, but we knew something was wrong. And we took him down, and the test showed that he had a growth on his small intestine. They asked to do surgery. We said yes. It was a malignant tumor. So we've been quite worried, waiting for the results. But it turns out it was a more common kind of tumor, and that the surgery was successful enough that he might not need any additional treatment. And I got to say, this past week, maybe like in the last 3 days, really had a turnaround, and he's back to his old self.
Fantastic. So I guess the Twitter star will continue. You're posting pictures all the time, I guess, right? Is that the deal? That's what I hear from everybody.
Oh yeah, we post a lot of pictures on Twitter, on Instagram. Now, my new co-anchor, Bill Hemmer, when we first started working together in this morning show, he said, it'll be too bad that your fans won't get any of the pictures from Jasper in Central Park in the mornings anymore. And I said, oh, no, they will. And he didn't know that my husband, Peter, is the one who walks Jasper and takes the pictures. I just get the benefit of posting them. So. Oh,
okay. All right. Hey, the other thing everybody wants me to ask is this whole thing on the 5, is this whole thing with Juan. Are you guys really friends? Is this an act? What is the deal there?
Oh, there's no acting anywhere. And yes, we are friends. Indeed. That's one of the things I've always loved about the 5 is the authenticity of it. We don't script anything except for the opening of, welcome to the 5. And so, yes, there's a lot of friendship, a lot of respect, and a lot of arguments that don't go past, the commercial breaks.
Well, you have a new book coming out, Everything Will Be Okay, Life Lessons for Young Women from a Former Young Woman. And let's talk about life lesson number one for you that you wish you would have had learned years ago, way back, I don't know if it's 10 years, 20 years. Let's just say it's a while back. What was the life lesson number one that you wish you would have had the answer to then that you have now?
What's interesting is that it's a lesson that, I was taught as a kid at home and at church. And again, learning it all throughout my life, but it's one that I have to keep relearning. And I think I'm not alone in that. And that is that worrying is not going to solve your problems. And I feel like I spent a lot of my early adulthood, in my 20s especially, worrying a lot about my future and my career. And then I met my husband on an airplane, and I worried about moving to England, and I worried and I worried and I worried. And I look back on that now, and the one thing I ask all of the young women that I mentor is to please don't worry your young lives away. And that's part of the reason I have the title of the book, is that everything will be okay, because you can try to plan your life out and you can worry about things that you have no control over. And you're just wasting time and energy that you could use more productively in your personal relationships and certainly in your profession.
You talk about personal integrity is the most valuable asset. Tell me why you think that's the case.
Well, it's kind of the only thing that you own. So when I was White House press secretary, Ari Fleischer and I would always talk about this. You don't have a budget, right? You don't control any assets. You can't actually do anything except for use your own capabilities to communicate to the best of your ability. And one of the things I do, and I open the book with a story about a young woman who called me one day. I was up here in New York. I'm still very close with many of the young women who work in Washington. Of course, they were in high school when I was press secretary, but people pass along contact information, and I try to be as available and accessible as I can. And this young woman called me, and she was upset because the congressman's office wanted her to issue a statement under her name that she thought was disrespectful in tone, the wrong approach, and unproductive. And she didn't want to put her name on it. And I said, well, then don't do it. And she felt that she didn't have the gravitas to say no. She thought she might get fired or demoted or shunned in the office. And she said, I don't think I can do that because I'm not Dana Perino. And I said, well, how do you think I became Dana Perino? And it is because over time, especially if you're in communications, but I think this is true everywhere, you realize that you are as good as your word. And if you fall back on that, and occasionally, of course, we will, right? We are human. You can chip away at your reputation and your own self-worth and your confidence, and you'll start to see that distrust build up over time. And so your personal integrity is something that you have to protect at all costs, I believe.
I have to ask you, first of all, I remember when you were press secretary, wasn't that during the time that, didn't you suffer an injury when that guy was throwing shoes at President Bush? I mean, didn't he throw a couple of shoes? It was in Baghdad or someplace, wasn't it?
That's exactly right. I was the only one who got hurt in the whole thing. Yes, so it was December of 2008. President Bush was making one final trip to Iraq. He was determined to try to shore up a relationship and a couple of important classified deals at the time, so that when the presidency was handed over to the next president, it could be as smooth as possible. And we went to Prime Minister Maliki's office where we were going to have this press conference. And we had been on the ground for about 9 hours, and 10 hours was the max that the Secret Service would allow us to be on the ground. So we're coming to an end. The president said, let's go do this press conference. So we all file in. I took my seat, and I was sitting next to the CIA interpreter, because he wore a lot of different hats, but on that trip, he was our interpreter for the press conference. And just as the president and Maliki started to take questions, this so-called reporter stood up and threw both of his shoes at President Bush, one after the other. And do you remember when President Bush, and people who don't remember that, or if you're too young, you don't have it in your mind's eye, you can see it on YouTube. Thank goodness President Bush is very athletic and just had great instincts and reflexes, and ducked both of the shoes and and looked at the guy like, who in the world throws shoes? What is going on? Well, Maliki was mortified, but what happened when the shoes were thrown, the Secret Service agent, he's about 6'5", his name was Don White, and he lunged forward to get the president to protect him. And when he did that, the steel arm of the boom mic swung around and caught me in the face right under the eye.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so I had my hand over my eye, and I was trying not to cry, but it hurts. I've never experienced anything like that, like that kind of violence or pain. And I thought that for sure the Secret Service was going to evacuate us right away. And to be honest, I did say a prayer because I thought it was a distraction for a bomb. There was so much equipment in the room. And at the time, that was really part of their Al-Qaeda's tactic, was to create a distraction and then do something even worse. But of course, none of that happened. And this one Marine, the president insisted on continuing the press conference. He said, no one is going to stop us from taking these questions. And he made Maliki stand there and take the questions from the reporters, which was the absolute right thing to do. And this Marine with the biggest hand, and I wish so much that I could find this guy, he reached over and grabbed my hand and literally pulled me up over the crowd, carried me to the door, and I was trying to leave. And the security guard said, no, nobody can leave. You know, it's kind of not a crime scene, but they don't want anyone to leave. And I said, well, I need a doctor. And he said, oh, I am doctor. My doctor. Anyway, by the time the president came to find me, one of my favorite pictures is one taken of us from behind, and he's got his arm around me. And he said, what happened? I saw you crying, but I thought you were crying because the guy threw a shoe at me. And I said, oh, Mr. President, you know I love you, but I grew up on a ranch, and I'm a little tougher than that. But I did have a black eye for 6 weeks.
So what happened to the guy who threw the shoes? Is he did he get locked up and the key thrown out, or what?
Interestingly, initially, yes, but then eventually he became kind of a martyr, and I think even the shoes or replicas of the shoes were displayed as like this was the great guy that threw shoes at the president, and he kind of became a hero to some people. I don't know what he's doing now, but I hope we never cross paths again.
When did you go from, flying by the seat of your pants to a role model?
Boy, that's such a great question. I've never had that question because it's funny when I laughed at the subtitle of the book, Life Lessons for Young Women from a Former Young Woman.
Mm-hmm.
When I left the press secretary's office, that was January 20th, 2009, I had so many requests for mentoring advice. Young women today are ambitious and educated and hungry for advice, and they want you to give them a plan that will show them exactly how they can achieve their dreams. Of course, we all know that exact plan doesn't exist, but I tried to do as many as I possibly could. And even there were times when people would say, oh, your transition from the White House to the private sector and to Fox News was so smooth. You handled it so well. And I would just kind of laugh and think, if they had any idea how stressed I was about making that decision and figuring out what I was going to do next. And again, all that worry.
There's the worry thing again, yeah.
The worry thing. I think when I wrote my first book, and the good news is, and I included a chapter 5 was all my mentoring advice in one place. I think that's when I felt like I turned a corner and had something concrete and, specific and concrete and actionable that I could share with others. But I got to tell you, I still learn every single day, and I still have role models, and that evolves and changes as I get older. There's some people I admire that are younger than me now. It's great. It's a great position to be in right now.
So who are some of your role models?
Well, growing up, This is going to sound funny. There was a couple that I would say in my mind's eye, I remember being a big admirer of Diane Sawyer of ABC News. She had worked in the Nixon White House and then made a transition into news. I thought she conducted herself very graciously and with dignity and great interest, a very good storyteller. Somebody who I thought was kind of a really neat lady and a boss lady was Sybil Shepherd's character in Moonlighting. Remember that with the white tennis shoes and the suit, and she would walk around. But, sometimes, there's a saying in mentoring world, if you have to see her to be her. And that's one of the reasons that some people talk about the first woman astronaut or the first woman to do this or that, because when I was growing up, there were no network anchors that were women. Looking back, I realized now that doesn't matter because we've made great strides and so many glass ceilings have been firmly cracked. And I think that's all for the good, and we're better off for it as a country. I would say there's another woman I would mention that she's not famous to people, but she really means a lot to me. And I wrote about her in the book. Her name is Anne Gloag. And I thought she was a Scottish heiress. Turns out she is a self-made businesswoman. She is a Scottish woman. She and her brothers started a busing company called Stagecoach. And over time, that grew to an international business. Well, I first came to know her actually because when I went to Liberia on a mission trip, I went to a place where they were helping women that were suffering from vaginal fistulas. And she had a place there that was just absolutely to take care of them, to repair them through surgery, to help them learn a trade, and just give them a little care and pampering before they went back to their villages, new women. The day that I was there, the women that were in a position to be in recovery at that point, they were learning to count to 10. These are grown women. And I was completely blown away by this place. Fast forward, I'm very active with Mercy Ships, which is a surgical hospital ship, faith-based ship that serves the west coast of Africa. And I go to a dinner where President Bush and Mrs. Bush were being interviewed on stage, and I was the moderator. And during the dinner, somebody says, where did you get your affection for helping people of Africa? And I told them about this trip and this Scottish heiress that I was impressed with. And they said, oh, she's not an heiress. She's sitting behind you. And she was on the board of Mercy Ships. Her name is Anne Gloag. She was recently made Dame Anne Gloag. She is a mother of, I think, 5 or 6 children, many grandchildren. She has adopted many children from Africa. And this woman has the biggest heart. And she is the tiniest physical woman I've ever seen, but with such a gigantic heart and a real nose for business, and her dignity just shines through. And so she's one of my current role models.
In this book, you talk about the one reason you wrote it is to help young women reframe their thinking, to believe in themselves, to take risks, to harness their inner power, and to find serenity in life's choices. And I have a 21-year-old and a 24-year-old daughter. Both are in college, finishing up college, getting ready to get their master's, etc. Both of them go to Christian colleges, one in Los Angeles, one in the Nashville area. They're conservative. They have been dealing with a lot of uncertainty in the world that they live in, because a lot of their, even though they go to these colleges that you would think would be somewhat conservative, there's all of this political correctness that goes on from the administration all the time that is, they try to stay out of that. And by the way, I'm not naming the names or naming the colleges because, like their mother said, don't tag them in anything because they'll get labeled.
Well, good mama.
Man, it's so confusing. It is so confusing for these girls because they were raised one way. They believe one thing. They are conservative. They are believers. But yet they live in this cancel culture, and they live in this political correctness culture. And daggone it, they're having a little bit of a difficult time with it. And they sit down and try to talk that out with me. But what do you recommend to a young conservative woman who's just, maybe 16, 18, 20, 22, and they're dealing with this constant tug of war now. And they're having a hard time with friends. They're having a hard time with coworkers, with college administrations. What do you recommend to them? How do they keep above the fray?
Such a great question, and obviously you're a wonderful father, and their mother as well, who's looking out for them. This is a really different challenge. Obviously, every generation has had challenges that they've had to deal with. This one almost seems very perplexing to those of us who are a little bit older, looking back and saying, well, wait, it's a lot of it is nonsensical. It's not logical. And it's also very interesting how they don't want to cancel people except for anyone they disagree with. That might happen to be you. And one of the things we talked about just a moment ago was integrity. And living a life of integrity can be, in some ways, a lonely place. I think it's wonderful that they are going to a Christian college where they will find good friends. I think one of the things I write about in the book that could help a little bit is remembering this lesson that you learned as a kid, which is not everybody is thinking about you all the time. Like we, as especially young women, we have a tendency to think that everyone is thinking about us and negatively. And the truth is that most people are actually just thinking about themselves. And I heard what you say about keeping their head down. That's a very interesting place to navigate, right? Because you also want to be a leader. I think now, in some ways, finding a way to pick your battles is a good one. Also, I think that trying to be a better listener, an active listener, and then being a more persuasive person by making good points on the merits where you can, that might be the best way to try to navigate this. I have a sense, and I hope I'm right. I know I could be wrong. I have a sense that some of this is going to burn itself out eventually because it's becoming absurd.
First of all, the double standards, let's face it, the organization that puts on the Golden Globes came out last week that they have no black members, no voting members, no members of the parent organization of the Golden Globes has any black individual from anywhere in the world. Mind you, this is an international deal, right? Now, if that would have been on the conservative side, NBC would have canceled the telecast. Let's face it. But by golly, there's the Golden Globes in prime time last night. And they kind of laughed about it and they kind of made a couple of little points here and there. But I can't imagine they can just continue on with that forever. People are just going to go, you know what? We've been hearing this, and they keep just putting out the same garbage, and then they have these double standards, and I just can't take it anymore. So
so many double standards. We're tied in knots.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I don't know if this is emblematic of anything, but I did think it was kind of interesting. There's a new sitcom that is called Mr. Mayor, and it has Ted Danson as the star. And a couple of friends of mine said, oh, it's pretty funny. You should watch it. So my husband and I finally figure out the remotes to find how to watch this show, even though it's on NBC. But things aren't as simple as just turning on NBC anymore. And it's co-written by Tina Fey and somebody else that was in that show Parks and Rec. And I got to tell you, it is completely making fun of political correctness in a way that makes it sound makes some of these claims sound absurd. And I thought, now that's interesting. They think that this show will be a hit because they're making fun of political correctness. And I think one of the best ways that we have to deal with things that our country is dealing with is to have satire. And maybe that was a little bit of a hint that people have said, enough is enough.
Yeah, you would hope so. Hey, in the book, you cover all kinds of things, and I want to just point some of these out and have you just address each one of them and kind of tell me a personal story about how some of these things relate, okay? Okay. Some of the challenges that you cover in the book, Everything Will Be Okay. For example, you talk about how to manage relationships
Yes, and from all sorts of different angles, right? I talk about your work relationships, and also to hopefully trying to find a loved one. I'll tell you one story that I have that I say to young women because now this isn't true of everyone, but I do mentor a lot of young women, and I see them sort of planning their whole life out, right? So they'll think, okay, I'm going to graduate when I'm 22, have my first job and my promotion by the time I'm 26. I will meet the man of my dreams when I'm 27. I'll have a first child when I'm 30, a second child when I'm 32, and we'll have the second home in the ski resort by the time I'm 36. And around the time they're 25, they start to realize, wait, none of this is happening the way I planned it. When I was 25, I kind of went through what I called a quarter life crisis. Career-wise, I was very much on track and heading towards, a great career, even though at the time I was sort of worried about it. But looking back, I was on track. But I hadn't gone on a date or met anybody I wanted to date, even though I was part of my church's singles group. I was open and willing to try to meet someone. Just was not happening at all. And I was quite upset. Finally, after talking with some friends at the singles group that we did on Wednesday nights at my Lutheran church, I just let it go. There's a woman named Cynthia Ermer, and she said, just fear not. Remember, God said, fear not. So I would tell myself over and over, fear not. So I kind of let that go. I'm focusing on my career. And one day I was coming back from a work trip in Colorado and flying from Denver to Chicago and then on to DC. And I sat next to a guy who had a British accent, and he asked if he could put my bag up above. And I did a quick scan that women know how to do, which was no wedding ring, cute, accent, struck up a conversation. And by the time I was landing in Chicago, I remember looking out the window and praying, Lord, I know I asked you to help me find somebody, but this is an airplane. He's much older than me. He's been married before. He lives in England. This is impossible. How could this possibly be happening? Nothing's going to work out, etc. Fast forward, we've been married 23 years. But I was really nervous about making the move to England to be with him. And part of the reason why is that I was kind of overwhelmed and overcome with my worries about what people would think about my decision. From a career standpoint, because I was really doing quite well in political communications. Also because he'd been married before. He had children from a previous marriage that weren't not that much older than me. He was quite a bit older than me. He's 18 years older than me. And I kept worrying about what people would think. And a family friend pulled me aside that Christmas. And she said, do not give up on this opportunity to be loved. You have to choose to be loved. And let it happen for yourself. You may never meet another man like this. And it just sort of alleviated a lot of that worry. And I would not have had any of the career success that I've had, or not at this level, without my husband, Peter. And I go back to that idea of, choosing to be loved. And if it happens and you're in the middle of a career and you think, oh, you don't want to move to Indiana because of X, Y, and Z, or he doesn't want to move there because X, Y, and Z, work it out. Because sharing your life with a committed partner is really one of the best blessings that I've ever had. And it's made everything else wonderful and exciting and worthwhile. Okay,
so 18 years. So let's say the cutoff's 20 years. Okay, that works for me. And then, I just got to get with the, you think the British accent did it?
I would say the British accent really helped.
So I got to get that one down. Okay.
You want to work on your British accent?
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about how to solve the biggest problems you're facing and find the big word here, serenity.
Yeah. So growing up, the serenity prayer was prominently displayed in our home. My mom had gone through the Children of Alcoholics program, in which the serenity prayer, of course, as you probably know, is very important to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think I learned more about that prayer as an adult. And I remember one time in college, I did this exercise that was recommended to me through a Christian counselor to write down on a piece of paper all of my worries and concerns on one side of the page. And then to mark the worries as if was something that I could control or not. And if I had control over that, then in another column, I would start making a little action plan for what I was going to do to deal with those worries. And then I would take this piece of paper and I would fold it up and put it in my purse or my wallet. And when I felt like those worries were about to overwhelm me again, if I remembered, I could pull out that piece of paper, look at it again, and just feel a little bit calmer. And I realized that calm was the serenity that was described in the serenity prayer. And the more I learned about that feeling of when did I feel my most productive and loved and settled, and it was those glimpses when you feel like, oh, I'm exactly where I need to be right now. And I believe, this is my own feeling, that gift of that feeling of serenity is what God has given to us as a gift, and that we have to do some work in order to find that space.
Mm-hmm.
But it's within that space when your heart and your mind are aligned, where you feel like you are just more at one with the world and everything starts to fall into place. So I, in the book, try to give some people, or give my readers some ideas about how to be in that place more often in your life. You're not always going to be in it. Not always. I mean, these are glimpses, and those glimpses can be real gifts. But over time, if you start to do this as a practice through prayer or meditation, or however you find it, you will have more success personally and professionally.
What role has prayer played in your life?
Well, it's interesting. So I was a little kid. I have a really good memory. And at church on Sundays, if you had memorized a new verse, you could get this like a credit, and you could go to the church store. I got so many precious moments, little gifts, because I was so good at it. I could memorize anything. And I loved the Beatitudes. I still do. I just loved the Beatitudes. I thought that was such beautiful writing. And the message, of course, is amazing. I also remember when I was in kindergarten through third grade, I walked to school 2 blocks away from my home in Denver, and it was wonderful. Denver was the first city to try busing to integrate the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went to 4th grade, I had to be bused 20 miles away to another school. I was one of 5 white children in my entire grade. Look, it was tough for me. It was tough for them.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough for the teachers. I got bullied a lot. I never physically beaten, but I would pray rotely over and over again, quietly, because I didn't want to be the kid that snitched.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would just pray over and over again, like, please don't let them be mad at me tomorrow. Just over and over, and almost like a worry bead. And that helped me, kind of get through those days. And eventually my parents, through trying to work with the school district, it didn't work. And we ended up moving. Fast forward, another time that prayer really played a role in my life is I was dealing with some real indecision about leaving local journalism to go into political communication. And I thought at the time, oh gosh, if I do that, I'll never get to work in TV again. Of course, that's a 22-year-old thinking. Mm-hmm. And I read about how if you are indecisive, just place your prayer, your question, in that space between when you're awake and right before you fall asleep. There's that little envelope, just like set that little question in there. Mm-hmm. And that when you wake up, you should feel like you have an answer. And I'm telling you, it works. I have used this method over and over again. And I think that it's because if you concentrate and you're listening to God and you're listening to your heart and you're being fully honest with yourself of what you put in that pocket, when you wake up in the morning, you should feel a little bit better because you've made better decisions from that perspective. And then the third way I would say that prayer has helped my life is through these mission trips that I've done in Africa. The universality of prayer, when you might not speak the language of somebody that you're sitting with in a hospice in South Africa, but you can hold hands and have that connection somebody in prayer. Gosh, I mean, it makes me a little emotional. Like, I would say that those are probably the three main ways.
Do you think you're an overthinker?
Oh my gosh. My husband would laugh so hard if he heard that. I mean, when Peter read the book, the early draft of it, he said, "Wow, women think a lot more than men." He said, "You guys spend more time thinking about what we're thinking about than we spend thinking." Yes. Oh. Yes, I think the answer is yes.
Oh my gosh. Hey, so many people that are listening to this right now, they, we've been faced with this big roadblock this year. I mean, we always hate when we are driving and all of a sudden it says, detour or, roadblock. And you think, wow, my destination's a half a mile down the road. Now you want me to drive 20 miles out of my way to get back there on the other side. And that's kind of the year that we have had. And a lot of people who, they're stuck at the roadblock. They're stuck, at that sign. I'm just going to ask you, since you're working with so many people and mentoring people, and the theme of your book is everything will be okay. What do you say to those people who are just right now listening, they're just stuck?
One of the things I'm saying to people, especially young people who maybe graduated last year and just had started their new job. I know a young woman who graduated in event management in December of 2019, started her new job here in the city. She's putting together events, and then guess what? There's no more events. And so she had to be very creative. She started a little business called Elizabeth Taylor, Tailor. She started making masks and other things, and actually things have worked out for her, but what a detour, speaking of that. And I would say, here's three things that I would recommend. I kind of just narrowed this down the other day. The first is to work on growing your network, even though you might be working from home or you might have lost your job. And it can be quite dispiriting because you think, well, how am I supposed to move up and get a promotion if I have no face time at the office? I had a very good recommendation, which is to network within the company. If you're not going to events where you're meeting people at the Chamber of Commerce meeting, but say you work in sales and marketing, but you don't know anything about operations. There's a way to reach out and learn something about that. So to grow within the company or within the network that you have through friends and family and former coworkers, if you're looking for work. The second thing is to grow your knowledge. I have something called ABL, always be learning. I always try to be the most prepared person in the room, as you point out. So rightly, I am an overthinker, but it has set me apart. And if you have some extra time right now, don't spend it watching Bravo. Read, listen to podcasts. Think of all the different ways that you can learn today. And there's just no excuse not to be spending at least some of this time by expanding your knowledge. And the third one is to grow your peace. That could be from establishing some good habits like going to bed earlier. I talk a lot about posture. Posture is good not only for your physical health, but also for your professional well-being. Maybe it's guided meditation or prayer or joining a group that can help you not be so isolated in this time as we try to put 2020 behind us.
Well, Dana, you've been delightful. I really appreciate the time. And the book is called Everything Will Be Okay, Life Lessons for Young Women from a Former Young Woman by Dana Perino. And Dana, I have to tell you, keep up the good work. Keep fighting for us. Keep the faith. And we really do appreciate you.
I appreciate you, and thank you for giving me the best laugh that I've had all day.
And I'm an
overthinker.
I'm gonna work on that British accent, And let me see, 18 years. Okay, that's that's good. I like that. That worked for me.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
There you have it. The book is called Everything Will Be Okay with Dana Perino, Life Lessons for Young Women from a Former Young Woman. It's a great book. Make sure you pick it up. It's, of course, on Amazon.com and available wherever you get your books. It's pretty cool. Thank you, Dana. Thank you for that time that you gave us, and I really appreciate it. Hey, you've been listening to CIA, Contagious Influencers of America, from the producers of Keep the Faith. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you giving us a 5-star review. That means a lot. That's how people find us. And I really, really highly encourage you to go do that because, it gives us credibility with a crowd. They're like, wow, this contagious influencer thing, I wonder if it's any good. They have great guests, but I wonder if the podcast itself is any good. And then, of course, they scroll down and see all these reviews. And so far, so good. We've got great reviews, and we really appreciate it. Hey, I want to encourage you to go out there and live that life in living color because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living it in black and white. I'm David Sams. I'll see you next time here on CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. Keep the faith.